we are talking about research design. So the keyword which you have to remember always is there are certain expectations. When we are planning for, when we are designing, when we are preparing a research design, there is some expectations that is on part of the researcher. Now, how do we number it out, these expectations? It is in the form of objectives, in the form of our final results, which we expect as part of this research. So that is why we always, I get the answer which you have been typing. So it is basically a research design is an outcome of your expectations about a particular research, right? So in my outcome, if I don't know what I really want, if I'm not sure why am I doing this research, definitely that will affect my research design. Right. So with this note, today in our today's class, we are going to discuss about research design. Now, I have put a definition in front of you, which will include all what we want to discuss under the heading called research design. In a social science research, a research design is very important because it is actually a constructive arrangement of all the steps in the entire research process. So that's why I put arrangement of conditions for collection, analysis of data in a manner that is relevant to the research purpose. That's what our expectations, our objectives, something for which we are doing the research. And along with that, of course, we know some of the scarce resources involve time, money, right? So that is why there should be economic arrangement of events, or maybe there should be economies of scale with the available resources. So it is arrangement of the steps in a orderly manner in order to achieve the result. So a good research design should contain neatly arranged steps in order to help the researcher, or in order to enable the researcher to achieve the results. Right. So this is actually a beginning. But when we are really into a process of research, I would say if you have prepared a research design well, it is like a research work half done. Well done, half done in the sense, if I know exactly how to sequence my entire research process, things are much easier from part of a researcher. So that is the purpose of a research design. Now you can imagine a tailor stitching a dress for you and you find that it is not fit for you. The entire thing is waste. So your design, your measurements, your aspects, everything should be well defined when we are going with an expected outcome. But this is little different when we are talking about an exploratory design, exploratory research design, right? But basically, a research design should define the steps in the entire research process in a systematic way. Correct. Now, moving further, uh, broadly, you can find all these things being included as part of your research design. So one is sampling design. Suppose if you have a plan to collect data, if you have a population in hand, you are aiming at a sample, then you should have a sampling design. It's nothing but the plan used for collecting data from the population, from the given population. So that you need to collect data in order to come to certain conclusions. Or if it is not the case of a collection of data, but you are planning at an observation, or you are planning to observe the units to arrive at certain conclusions, then you should have an observational design. Or maybe if you are going to go with the census data, the entire data, if you're going to collect the entire data, census survey, In that case, definitely that also should be planned so that we are not leaving any unit out of our design. We should be able to collect the entire data if we are talking about census survey. So that should be there as part of our research design. Then the second thing talks about statistical design. In certain cases, we have or we prepare a hypothetical plan stating that yes, these are the statistical tools that can be used based on the expected outcome. Suppose if my aim is causality, cause and effect relationship, I will definitely look into some regression model. But if I really have to find out the relationship between two variables, I might be looking into some of the correlation models. Some of I will be trying to establish correlation between the variables. So I should have some kind of a statistical design. It is true that whatever we design, depending upon the nature of the data which we get, our our justification for use of statistical tools will vary. Maybe we'll go with probability sampling techniques or non-probability sampling techniques, which you're yet to learn. But still, we should have some idea regarding how are we going to analyze the data. If it is a quantitative data, what are the tools which we are going to use, analyze it at the time of preparation of our research design itself. We should be aware of the possibilities which we can make use of, right? And of course, finally, the operational design. I have everything in my hand, but I don't know how to start the process, how to implement or how to execute the process. That will land up in or maybe we will land up in a problem. So in order to avoid that, we have to have an operational design, looking into the sample we have, looking into the type of population, looking into the field, the other external variables that is going to affect our studies. We have to have some kind of operational design. See, last day when I was talking about collecting data from migrant laborers, we were discussing that example in our class. In that case, I have to have a different operational plan when I'm dealing with respondents having representing different states of India. When I'm having respondents representing different cultures, I need to have some kind of strategic operational design for me to proceed with the accurate data collection. Right. So likewise, I have to have, how am I going to operate? Am I going to distribute the entire thing, conduct the entire thing in an online mode? Maybe the current situation is like that. Then I will have to think, is my research topic suitable for such a thing? Does it require one-to-one, face-to-face interaction with the respondents? All these facts I would be considering when I'm thinking about operational design. So definitely our research design will have specific plans for collection of sample, designing of sample collection instrument, or maybe data collection instrument. I will also be aware about what are the possibilities of statistical tools if I'm talking about a quantitative data. And if it is a case of qualitative data, I also should be having some kind of design to analyze the data in hand, right? The data or the information gathered by me. And then finally, I should have a correct, well-defined plan for conducting the actual work, or maybe in my actual research process, I should have a design, right, which should align with my objectives, which should help me to achieve my outcome. So these are some of the important parts, some of the significant parts of a research design. Now moving further, when I'm looking at a research design, I should put a checklist in at least these 4 factors. One is, my research design should help me to obtain the data which I require. At the same time, it should help me to lead to my or successfully achieving my objectives. Suppose, for example, if I'm talking about, I would like to know the impact of financial literacy programs among rural women. Now, government is having a lot of programs, right? To improve the financial literacy of people, especially the rural community, so that they are out of the fraudulent conditions, or no, they can have some kind of financial discipline, right? So in that case, I would like to know what is the effect of such. So basically, our first thing is I should be able to identify the correct population for my study, right? My design should be supportive to identify the population, and if I'm aiming at a sample, my design should enable me to collect the sample from there. Right. So that is why there should be a means for obtaining the information. When I'm talking about a good research design, it should help me in obtaining the information. And the second one is, when I'm talking about a research, definitely I will have a purpose for conducting a research. Maybe to fill a gap, to fill a research gap, or to find a solution to an existing problem. So I have to ensure that my design, the design which I've selected, is supportive for me to achieve that. Say, for example, if I am planning at a quantitative analysis, if I'm planning at building a model, the model which can be experimentally proved, it can be experimentally developed into a model which is applicable to different conditions. In that case, my design should be supportive for me to collect quantitative data, because I am aiming at developing a model to approve or disapprove a particular condition. Say, for example, I'm saying that increase in financial literacy, okay, among people can reduce or maybe no, I'm saying increase in the financial literacy can improve the rural economic condition, or economic condition of the rural economy. So I have a model where I am trying to find out the cause and effect. Increase in financial literacy is it is my independent variable, and it can lead to improving the economic condition of people. So that's a dependent variable. So I have two which needs to be quantitatively tested if I have to develop a model. So there are many other factors that can affect the so-called economic well-being of the people. It can be the programs introduced by the government, or it can be the climatic conditions if it is an agrarian economy, or it can be the improvement in the job opportunities in the economy. There are many other conditions, but I am going to develop a model which can test, okay, if there is an increase in the financial literacy of the people, it can help them in creating a better condition, better economic condition. So I have to develop it. So my design should be appropriate enough to test this model. My design should have factors that will enable me to test this model. So that is why a research design should be appealing, or should be facilitating in the achievement of objectives of the researcher. And definitely, suppose if I'm a person who's not comfortable with the, as we say, with numbers, with statistical tools, because we need some, with econometric models, we need some kind of experience, some kind of expertise for dealing with data. Right. Suppose if the researcher is not in a comfortable position for analyzing the data, for arriving at conclusion, then it is better that he should go with some other design which can align with its skills and ability. How the problem needs to be done. All these things needs to be considered, and the design should include such factors, should take into consideration such factors which will decide the quality of the output which we decide, or the quality of the research process. So that's why the availability and the skills of the research, availability of resources, and the other resources, in the sense, say for example, I was talking about a study being conducted in the rural economy, directly meeting the respondent. But in some of the economies economies like developed market, they don't allow you to meet the respondents directly without getting permission. So if I have some restrictions like that, if the researcher is aware of such restrictions, then I should come up with some design where I can collect the data in the available condition. If I'm no, if I'm not able to, if I'm not permitted to, then I will have to find a design which will enable me to arrive at the conclusion without interacting the existing system, existing framework of the system. Which means maybe I can search for some of the published data, availability of published data. I can inculcate that in my study in order to avoid this one-to-one or face-to-face interaction with the respondents, which may not be permitted. Likewise, so my design should consider, when the researcher is preparing a plan, he should consider all these factors before finalizing it. So that's why we say that a good research design should enable the researcher to visualize the entire research process accurately. To visualize in the sense, the researcher should be able to identify which are the obstacles which may occur, which are the factors that need to be considered, and finally arriving at a design. So it's actually a blueprint of the entire research process. If a good research design should be a blueprint of the entire research process, right? So that's how we prepare a design. Now, there are certain concepts which are very much associated with research design, which I slowly started discussing: the concept of dependent variable and independent variable, and also the concept of extraneous variable. See, I had quoted a study initially, financial literacy to economic well-being. That was the relationship which I was trying to establish. So I know that financial literacy is an independent variable. Okay, it is independent. There is nothing that is going to affect it. It's actually a variable which I have selected. Now you might be asking, what is a variable, right? For every study, there would be certain variables being identified, which most probably will be quantitatively expressed. See, in our study, we identified two variables. One is financial literacy, second one is economic well-being. And now if I have to if I have to establish a relationship, definitely I have to quantitatively express these variables. I have to express these variables through numbers. If I have to use some of the statistical tools, I have to have this establish this relationship in numbers. So again, when I have variables, there are possibilities that some of it will fall into independent variables which cannot be manipulated, which needs to be represented as it is. And the impact of these variables will be felt on some other variable which will be my dependent variable. Right. And in this case, I was talking about no, financial literacy being an independent variable and economic well-being of the rural community being a dependent variable. So as the increase in financial literacy happens, I expect there is an increase, positive development with respect to economic well-being. That's my context. That's my research. Okay. I want to establish a model. But now I understand that the economic well-being is a concept which is not only dependent on financial literacy. There are many other factors that can affect this economic well-being. See, I said the example as no, the government policies. Other than the financial literacy program, there are many other policies, right? Or availability of employment opportunities, a boom in the economy, right? Or maybe an increase in the agriculture production because of favorable climatic conditions. All these can be variables that can have an impact on economic well-being of the people. But for this particular study, I am focusing only on financial literacy, because I want to I want to know the exact relationship between financial literacy and the economic well-being of rural community. So I'm just solely looking into this variable. Even though there are many other variables that can impact the result, I'm just eliminating that for my particular study. So those are called as extraneous variables that are not related to the purpose of the study. They are independent variables. Increase in the job opportunities, independent variable. For this particular, see, first you have to understand that the concept of independent variable and dependent variable can vary from condition to condition, can vary from situation to situation. The same independent variable, for example, financial literacy, can be a dependent variable in some other study. It depends on the condition. It's not a hard and fast rule that financial literacy always will be a independent variable. No, in this particular study, I am looking at what is the impact of this on other. So that's why this is actually it's identified as an independent variable. But basically, when I'm talking about the conceptual, based on the conceptual relevance, based on the conceptual importance, the concept of independent and dependent variable can vary from study to study, research to research. For example, if I just take this another example as price and demand. Always we say that a decrease in price can increase demand. So price being an independent variable, demand being a dependent variable. But there are cases where we can see that price becomes a dependent variable. It varies with condition. So that's why there is no hard and fast rule that one variable will always be dependent or always be independent. It depends upon the purpose for which we are conducting the research. In the example which I was mentioning here, I want to study the impact of financial literacy on economic well-being of people. So there, the financial literacy is an independent factor and economic well-being is a dependent factor. Now, as I said, there are many other factors that can affect the economic well-being of the people. In the rural economy, I mentioned many other factors like employment opportunities, maybe the external other programs introduced by the government, or maybe it can be the better market for the products of the rural economy, better market being established by the government, or it can be better transportation and other facilities, improvement in the infrastructure facilities. There are many other factors, but for my study, I am looking into only this. So all other factors will be put under the category of extraneous variable. Now, it is very, very important for you to understand these three concepts. Because for every research, for experimental research, these three concepts are extremely important for a researcher to establish a relationship. Right. So that's why I'm repeating it again and again. So in the particular example, other than financial literacy and the economic well-being, the two variables identified, all other will become the extraneous variable. They're not part of our study. They're not part of our study, but they can have some impact on this particular scenario. Of course, such variables will be called as extraneous variables. And now you might be asking, how do we nullify the impact of these? For that, we conduct the principle of replication, which we are yet to learn. We apply the principle of replication, repeated experiments and checking whether we get the same result. Repeated experiments in different control groups, to ensure that we get the same result, to ensure that our model is acceptable under all conditions. All right. So that's it. So that's a concept of dependent and independent variable. Now, one more thing which we are planning to design in this, discuss in today's class is different types of research design. It is very important because when I started the class, I said, yes, every research design should look into a structure. It should be a blueprint of the entire research process. It should sequence the structure of the research in more or less in a rigid way, correct? But I make a slight correction here with respect to exploratory study. Now we know that exploratory studies are just no for those studies where you would like to get some familiarity with a particular scenario, or you want to formulate a hypothesis, or you are in the stage of designing, or you are in the stage of deciding about a research topic. You're very new. You conduct a preliminary study to understand the variables, to identify the variables, to identify the relationship between the variables. All that would fall part of exploratory study. Now, the very basic nature of exploratory study is their design cannot be rigid. Exploratory study, you don't know what is it. You cannot anticipate how is it, what type of relationship the variables are having between them. So in that case, you cannot go with a rigid design. You cannot go with a correct blueprint, but it will be flexible enough to accommodate the different scenario. You will have a design, but your design would be flexible enough to accommodate the changes that is happening as you go with you, or as you proceed with your study. So such type of studies, exploratory studies, will be having a flexible design, but you will have some kind of plan. You will know that, yes, I want to study the relationship between, I want to know more, what are the factors that is going to affect financial literacy for people. I want to know what is financial literacy having some kind of relation with economic well-being. So I'm just studying that by reading different works, going through the theory, right? I'm just trying to understand. So in that case, I will not be having a rigid, exact research design. My design would be little flexible enough or it will be dynamic enough to incorporate the changes that is happening in the economy. So that's the only difference in what we had been discussing. It's not rigid, it's not an exact blueprint. But with respect to the other two categories, that is, in case of a descriptive or diagnostic research, or in case of a hypothetical testing research, or otherwise called as experimental research, it is said that the research design needs to be rigid enough. It should be a blueprint to achieve the real-time objective. So in case of a descriptive, we know that it is actually you are describing as it is. The researcher is trying to explain the particular scenario or maybe a condition. He is trying to picturize how is it in the real condition. And diagnostic research is one step ahead. The researcher is trying to answer few more questions, whether this exists, in what all conditions this relationship exists, or whether there will be a change in this in the present condition when few variables are introduced, or when all the possible outcomes. Say for example, if you are looking at the customer retention management in banks, so the researcher will look into what are the type of customer retention strategies used by banks, by the banks in India. And then one step ahead, when will be these strategies being used, or when will be these strategies be effective, or is there a difference in these strategies depending on the type of customers? Correct. So that all will fall under the category of diagnostic research, where the researcher, along with describing, he applies his or her own logical reasoning, or no, he tries to bring some kind of inputs other than what he has found through his study by going with an extensive analysis. So that's diagnosis research. And in case of the last one, hypothesis testing research, it's actually causality study. In hypothesis study, definitely there would be an independent variable and dependent variable, or there will be, in general case, there will be existence of dependent and independent variable, and we are trying to study the relationship between these two, the dependent and independent variable. and through various experiments. We will conduct different experiments in order to approve or disapprove a particular condition. So there also we need a definite plan. Research design should be accurate enough to accommodate all the sequences in that, all the steps in that particular research. So that's why we say that there also we require a good research design to achieve the objective. A good research design should accommodate the possible variables, right? The conditions in which the occurrence of the event can happen. Maybe we'll have a control group and an experimental group, which tomorrow we will explain all these in detail with different types of experimental designs. But there also the context of research design will be rigid, will be more or less predictive of the actual steps that is going to happen in the real research conditions, right? So these are the aspects which are directly related with research design. In fact, no, I started with quoting an example of a dress, right? A tailor stitching a dress, you are giving instructions, you are giving your design. Ultimately, what you expect is it should help, it should look good on you. It should be no, something which is very much suitable to you. That is the context in which we explain the research design also. A design should be suitable enough to achieve the objectives of a research. A research design should be helping the researcher to achieve the results without any difficulty. Of course, you will have many other constraints, many challenges while you're conducting, but it should incorporate all the factors, if possible, all the factors that can help the researcher to conduct the research in the most efficient way. That is the purpose of a research design. So we said a research design is actually a plan of action for the research process. It should incorporate your data collection techniques, data analysis techniques, data presentation techniques, and it should help the researcher to conduct that in a systematic and orderly manner. It should be arranged well. The design should be arranged well so that the researcher should be able to achieve the results. We discussed about certain concepts. Right, we discussed about the concept of dependent variable, independent variable, extraneous variable. Independent variable and dependent variable are generally part of hypothesis testing research or experimental studies, where we try to study the effect, cause and effect of these two variables, the effect of independent variable on the dependent variable. I quoted the example of financial literacy on economic well-being of rural community. Right. And extraneous variables are those variables which are supposed to have some kind of impact. But for this particular study, for our study, we are not considering that. They have some impact. We are trying to nullify that impact. We have not included that in our study. Right. Then we talked about the research design for an exploratory study, for a descriptive and diagnostic study, and we also explained the type of design that is required for an experimental study. We are going to discuss this, the experimental studies, design concerned with experimental studies in detail in our tomorrow's class. Right. So I stop here. If you have any doubts regarding that, some of you have already put these in the chat box.